They kidnapped my son thinking they could break me, but they forgot I'm the man who makes monsters beg for mercy. That's how it began, when a corrupt HOA crossed a line no one should ever cross. Fake HOA tried to kidnap my son, didn't know Dad's a lethal Marine sniper. Welcome to HOA Karen Files, where we expose the clipboard tyrants and power-hungry vultures who think they can rule your life with fines and fake smiles. I'm here to tell you the story of Colonel Ethan Caldwell, a special forces legend who turned a suburban nightmare into a battlefield, taking down a criminal empire to save his boy. This isn't just a tale of vengeance. It's a warning to every HOA Karen out there. Mess with the wrong family and you'll face a reckoning. If you're fed up with overreaching HOAs, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and join our fight at HOA Karen Files. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what's the worst HOA horror you've faced? Let's dive into Pine Hollow, where a Marine showed the world what happens when you threaten what's his. I am Colonel Ethan Caldwell, forged in the fires of war, tempered by 20 years of hunting the world's deadliest threats through deserts, mountains, and cities that smelled of blood and betrayal. Special Forces, Green Beret, a man who stared into the abyss and made it blink. When I hung up my uniform, I thought I'd traded chaos for peace, moving my son, Liam, to the polished streets of Pine Hollow. A sanctuary, they called it. Manicured lawns, gleaming houses, neighbors with smiles as crisp as their pressed shirts. I chose this place for Liam, my 10-year-old rock, to give him a life free from the shadows of my past. I was wrong, dead wrong. Beneath the surface of Pine Hollow, a predator lurked, cloaked in suits and clipboards, wielding rules like weapons. They thought they could break me. They didn't know they'd picked a fight with a man who'd never lost a mission, and never would. Pine Hollow was a lie wrapped in a postcard, rows of colonial-style homes, each with shutters aligned like soldiers on parade, white picket fences that screamed stability, a community pool where kids splashed under the watchful eyes of parents sipping overpriced coffee. It was the kind of place you'd see in a real estate ad, promising safety, status, and a slice of the American dream. After losing my wife, Sarah, to a cancer that tore through her faster than a bullet, I needed this. Liam needed this. He'd been 6 when she slipped away, his small hand clutching hers as the monitors flatlined. I'd promised her I'd keep him safe, give him a home where grief couldn't follow. Pine Hollow seemed like the answer. A fortress for my boy to grow, laugh, and leave behind the weight of loss. But fortresses can be sieges in disguise, and Pine Hollow was no exception. The first crack in the facade came the day we arrived. A moving truck rumbled behind us as Liam and I stepped out of my old Jeep, its dense a map of missions I'd never talk about. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and money. Neighbors glanced from their porches, their eyes lingering a beat too long, not curious, but calculating. Liam, his backpack slung over one shoulder, squinted at the house. "It's big, Dad. Too big for just us." His voice carried that quiet wisdom he'd inherited from Sarah, the kind that saw through surfaces. I ruffled his hair. "We'll make it ours, kid. You'll see." But even as I said it, a prickle ran down my spine, the same instinct that had kept me alive in Kandahar when an ambush was seconds away. The welcome packet was waiting on the doorstep, a glossy folder stamped with the Pine Hollow Homeowners Association logo, a stylized tree that looked more like a claw. Inside were rules thicker than a field manual. Grass height not to exceed 2 inches. Mailboxes limited to 3 approved colors. No outdoor decorations without prior approval. I'd seen less bureaucracy in military bases under lockdown. Liam flipped through it, frowning. "They care about our trash cans more than we do." I chuckled, but the weight of those pages settled in my gut. Control like that wasn't about order. It was about power. The HOA orientation meeting was mandatory, set for Saturday morning in the community center, a glass and steel monstrosity that screamed new money. Liam stayed home with a neighbor's kid, playing video games, while I walked into a room that felt like a courtroom. Rows of folding chairs, a podium up front, and a dozen residents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. At the helm was Cassandra Wells, the HOA president, A woman in her late 40s with a smile sharp enough to cut steel. Her tailored blazer and pearl earrings were armor, her clipboard a weapon. She moved like a predator, all grace and menace, her eyes locking onto me the moment I entered. "Colonel Caldwell," she said, her voice smooth as a sniper's trigger pull. "We're so pleased to have you in Pine Hollow." She extended a manicured hand, but her grip was too tight, her gaze too hungry. I'd faced warlords who hid their intent better. "Just Ethan now," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Retired." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered like she was filing that away. "Retired, yet so young. What do you do to keep busy, Ethan? Single father, new to the area. It must be quite the adjustment." I mentioned my work as a security consultant, leaving out the decades of tracking high-value targets through hostile terrain. Her questions came fast, each one a probe. My income, my travel schedule, Liam's school hours. She wasn't making small talk. She was building a dossier. "It's just you and your son, correct?" she pressed, flipping through her clipboard. "No other family nearby?" The room was silent, the other residents watching like cowed recruits. I nodded, my jaw tight. "Just us." Her smile widened, a shark smelling blood. Liam's reaction when I got home confirmed my unease. "Dad, that lady from the HOA stopped by while you were gone. Asked if you work late a lot. I didn't tell her anything." His eyes were sharp, wary. At 10, he already had a soldier's instincts. "Good call, kid," I said, pulling him into a quick hug. "You don't owe her answers." But the prickle in my spine was now a full-blown alarm. Cassandra Wells wasn't just nosy. She was hunting. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the house too quiet, the shadows too deep. Sarah's photo on the mantel watched me, her smile a reminder of the promise I'd made. I'd failed her once, letting the cancer win. I wouldn't fail Liam. Outside, the street was still, but I felt eyes on us. Not paranoia, instinct, honed by years of knowing when I was being watched. I checked the windows, the locks, the corners of the property. Everything was secure, but secure didn't mean safe. Not here. The next morning I found the note. Tucked in our mailbox, a crumpled scrap of paper with 5 words scrawled in black ink. "Get out now. You're marked." Below it, a single word. Sentinel. My blood ran cold. Sentinel was my old unit's call sign, known only to a handful of men I'd bled with in places the world forgot. Someone knew who I was, not just the retired colonel, but the hunter who dismantled terrorist cells and walked away from explosions without looking back. This wasn't a prank. It was a warning. I burned the note in the backyard, the flames licking the paper as Liam slept upstairs. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Cassandra's questions, the HOA's rules, the neighbors' glances. Pine Hollow wasn't a community, it was a trap, and we'd walked right into it. I'd faced enemies before, but they wore fatigues or hid in caves. These wore suits and smiled at block parties. They thought they could scare me. They thought wrong. I was a soldier, a father, a man who'd carved his name into the bones of those who crossed him. Pine Hollow was about to learn what happens when you threaten a Marine's family. Nguyen Han. The enemy revealed itself slowly, like a snake uncoiling in the grass. Pine Hollow's perfection was a mask, and I was trained to see through masks. Cassandra Wells and her HOA weren't just petty bureaucrats. They were predators, running a machine built on fear and greed. They thought they could crush us, bleed us dry, and spit us out. They didn't know I'd spent my life breaking machines bigger than theirs, and I wasn't about to let them touch my son. The first week was a study in deception. Neighbors waved, but their eyes darted away when I met their gaze. Mail arrived daily, bills for HOA fees that rivaled my mortgage, notices about violations I hadn't committed. One cited a non-compliant mailbox color, demanding $500 to replace it with an approved shade of slate gray. Another fined me $1,000 for a lawn that was a quarter-inch too long. I'd seen less aggressive shakedowns in war zones. Liam noticed it too. "Dad, why do they care about our grass? It's just grass." I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew this wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. I started digging, the way I used to when tracking a target through hostile territory. Public records were my first stop, accessed from a secure laptop in my home office. A room I'd already swept for bugs. Old habits die hard. What I found made my skin crawl. Pine Hollow had seen 12 homes sold in the past year, all at prices so low they screamed fraud. The sellers were predictable. Elderly widows, single parents, retirees on fixed incomes, vulnerable. The buyers? Shell companies with names like Evergreen Holdings and Prospect Ventures, all tied to offshore accounts. Each property was flipped within months, netting millions. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a slaughterhouse. I knocked on Margaret Lane's door, 2 houses down. She was 72, a widow whose husband had built their home with his own hands. Her front yard was a riot of roses, defiant against the HOA's sterile rules. When she opened the door, her hands trembled, her eyes hollow. "Colonel Caldwell," she said, glancing over my shoulder. "What do you want?" I kept my voice low, steady. "I'm trying to understand this place, Margaret. The fines, the rules, what's going on?" She hesitated, then ushered me inside, locking the door behind us. Over weak tea, she spilled the truth. The HOA was a racket. Fines came without warning, each one steeper than the last. $2,000 for a cracked driveway, $500 for unapproved flower beds. When she couldn't pay, Cassandra offered to buy her house, at half its value. "They want me out," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This was our home, mine and Tom's, 40 years. Now they're saying my roses are a visual nuisance. Fined me $3,000 last week." Her hands clutched the teacup like a lifeline. "I can't fight them, Ethan. I'm tired." I listened, my jaw tight, my mind mapping the enemy's tactics. Identify the weak, apply pressure, break them. It was a playbook I'd seen in insurgent campaigns. Only this time, the battlefield was a suburban street. "You're not alone, Margaret," I said. "I'll find a way." She shook her head, fear etched into every line of her face. "Be careful. They're not just bullies. They're dangerous." Dangerous didn't scare me. I'd walk through minefields with less caution than most people cross the street. But the note from Sentinel gnawed at me. Whoever sent it knew my past, my unit, my methods. I spent nights combing through old mission logs, cross-referencing names from my days in the field. No matches. Whoever they were a ghost, and ghosts don't warn you unless the threat is real. The next red flag came from Liam. He joined a kids club run by the HOA, a supposed leadership program. I let him go, but only after fitting him with a tracker, a watch with a hidden GPS, a relic from my ops days. "If anything feels off, press it twice," I told him. He nodded, his face serious. "Like our camping games, right? Run, yell, tell." I smiled, proud. "Exactly, kid." But when he came home, his words hit like a gut punch. "Mrs. Wells asked about your work, Dad. When you're gone, where you go. She said it's for a neighborhood safety plan." I didn't say anything. My blood turned to ice. Using my son as a spy? That was a line you don. Ascending to the top of a church tower, a sniper's bullet would be kinder. I pulled him into a quick hug, my voice low. "You did right, Liam. You always tell me everything, understand?" He nodded, but I saw the worry in his eyes. He was 10, not blind. He knew something was wrong. I installed cameras around the house that night, hidden in shrubs and eaves, feeding to a secure server. Old habits. I taught Liam basic evasion tactics, disguised as games. "If someone you don't know tries to grab you, what do?" I asked, tossing a football in the yard. He grinned, shouting, "Run! Yell! Tell!" I laughed, but my chest tightened. I was training my son to survive in a place that was supposed to be safe. The cameras caught the next move. At 2 a.m., a man crept through my yard, moving like he'd done it before. Broad shoulders, buzz cut, a face that looked carved from granite. He lingered by Liam's window, snapping photos with a phone. I zoomed in on the footage, my heart pounding. In his hand was a folder, thick, labeled Caldwell Assessment. This wasn't about fines or property. They were targeting my son. I recognized the pattern instantly. Build a profile, find the pressure point, leverage it. Classic interrogation tactics, only this time the target was a 10-year-old boy. My boy. Rage burned in my veins, but I kept it locked down. Anger without focus is a death sentence. I needed intel, not revenge. Not yet. I reached out to Detective Javier Alvarez, a cop I'd met during a consulting gig. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, a handshake that said he wasn't bought. We met at a diner 3 towns over, no chances taken. Pine Hollow's been on my radar, he admitted, stirring his coffee. Complaints about the HOA, but nothing sticks. Witnesses vanish. Reports get lost. These people are ghosts. I shared what I knew. Fines, forced sales, the kids' club. I kept the note and my past to myself. Trust is earned even with cops. Alvarez leaned forward, voice low. I've got a contact in state police. Someone clean. Get me hard evidence and I'll make sure it hits the right desks. But Ethan, watch your back. These people don't play nice. I nodded, my mind already planning. Evidence. That's what I needed. Something so damning even a corrupt system couldn't bury it. The HOA called an emergency meeting the next day. Cassandra stood at the podium, her voice dripping with authority. New rules. No outdoor lighting without approval. All fences must be cedar, not pine. A community enhancement fee of $750 a month. The residents sat silent, heads bowed like prisoners. When I stood to object, Cassandra's eyes locked on mine. Mr. Caldwell, as a new resident, perhaps you should learn our ways before challenging them. The threat was clear, her smile ablade. After the meeting, a man approached me in the parking lot. George Tanner, 65, retired mechanic, hands calloused from a lifetime of work. They got my sister last year, he said quietly. Single mom, 2 kids. Fined her $15,000 for structural issues. She sold for pennies. They're vultures, Colonel, and they know your trouble. He glanced around nervous. They've got eyes everywhere. Cops, City Hall, be smart. That night, I cross-checked Tanner's story. His sister's house sold for $200,000 below market, bought by a company linked to Cassandra's brother. The pattern was airtight. This wasn't random. It was a campaign, surgical, relentless. They were dismantling lives, and now they'd set their sights on us. The final straw came when Liam's tracker pinged at 3 a.m., miles from home. He'd been at the HOA's leadership camp, a weekend event I'd reluctantly allowed, thinking I could monitor him. The signal led to an industrial park, a cluster of abandoned factories on the edge of town. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sign over your house, half value, no cops, or the kid pays. They'd made their move, amateurs. They thought they could scare me, break me, own me. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I was a hunter, a soldier, a father who'd burned the world to ash before letting anyone touch my son. I grabbed my gear, burner phone, knife, the fake deed I'd prepared, and headed out. The game was on, and I played to win. Duay jay la fanchao traukwa kao chuyin, the iron stand a soldier's fight for family. Juocha viet, boyjo dai kong 3,400 gyugyongwan manme, jantep, the hien ki chatkwa mot ngoy kwan han. Fan nai juak thiet ke jefu, hop voy toy long audio, huang 40 foot kiket hop. Voy kas fan truk, jong toy jambao noi dung nguyen ben, tuan tu luat fair use. Toy tiep tuk su dung artifact it kwa kao chu entrok je dui triting nat kwan. The Iron Stand, a soldier's fight for family. Cao Trao, the night was a blade, sharp and cold, cutting through the silence of the industrial park. My Jeep idled a block away, engine off, lights dark. The tracker's signal pulsed on my phone. A steady heartbeat from Liam, my son, my mission. He was inside a rotting factory, surrounded by Cassandra Wells and her pack of jackals. They thought they held the cards, thought they could break a man like me with a single text. Sign over your house? Half value, no cops, or the kid pays. Fools. They didn't know they just lit the fuse on a Marine who'd walk through hell and come out swinging. I was Colonel Ethan Caldwell, Special Forces, And tonight, I wasn't just a father. I was a hunter, and my prey was about to learn what happens when you corner a man who never backs down. The factory loomed ahead, a skeleton of rusted steel and broken glass, its silhouette jagged against the moonless sky. I moved on foot, silent, my boots barely kissing the gravel. Every sense was razor sharp, honed by years of stalking targets through deserts and slums where a single misstep meant death. The air stank of oil and decay, but beneath it I caught the faint tang of cigarette smoke. Someone was careless. I cataloged the terrain. 2 main exits, a loading dock on the east side, high windows too grimy to see through clearly. Security cameras hung limp, wires dangling like severed arteries. Amateurs. They relied on fear, not skill, and that was their first mistake. I crouched behind a stack of rotting pallets, my burner phone pressed to my ear, its recorder active. The device was a holdover from my ops days, small enough to hide in a seam of my jacket. Evidence was my weapon tonight, as lethal as any blade. I dialed the number from the text. Cassandra answered on the second ring, her voice slick with false concern. "Mr. Caldwell, so glad you called. Your boy's safe, for now." Such a brave little soldier. It'd be a shame if he learned what happens to families who defy us. I let my voice crack, playing the part of a desperate dad. "Don't hurt him. Please. I'll do whatever you want." Inside, rage burned white hot, but I kept it chained. Focus was my edge. "Why Liam? Why us?" I asked, feeding her ego, knowing predators like her couldn't resist gloating. She laughed, a sound like glass shattering. "Oh, Ethan, you're smarter than that. Pine Hollow's a gold mine. Your corner lot? 2 million once we rezone it for commercial. Your military pension, that fat insurance payout from your wife's death, it makes you a perfect mark. Sign the deed and Liam walks. Simple." I gripped the phone tighter, her casual mention of Sarah's death like a knife to the gut. "You're destroying lives for money," I said, letting my voice tremble just enough. "How many others?" She took the bait, her tone smug. 20 homes in Pine Hollow alone. 50 million in profits. We've got this down to a science. Fines, foreclosures, fear. The HOA is untouchable. No oversight, no limits. Cops? Bought. The chief's kid got a full ride to college. The mayor's yacht didn't pay for itself. We're in 15 states, Ethan. 100 neighborhoods. You're just a pebble in our road. Every word was gold, piling up on the recorder. I kept her talking, my eyes scanning the factory's perimeter. "And Liam, he's just a kid." Her voice hardened. "Collateral. You're a soldier, you know how this works. Pressure points. You love that boy more than anything. Makes him the perfect lever." She paused, her smirk audible. "But you're special, Ethan. Most people fold when we lean on them. You fought back. I almost respect that." Almost. I spotted movement near the loading dock, a shadow shifting, the glint of metal. One of her goons, Vince, the granite-faced thug who'd cased my house. He carried a pistol, held low, his posture sloppy. I marked him, then checked the tracker. Liam was 50 yards inside, likely in the main warehouse. Alive. That was all I needed to know. "Let me talk to him," I said, my voice raw. "I need to know he's okay." Cassandra hesitated. Then I heard muffled voices. Liam's came through, small but steady. "Dad, I'm okay. They're mean, but I remembered what you taught me. I'm being brave." My heart swelled, pride cutting through the rage. "That's my boy," I said, my voice firm now. "Remember our song, the one Mom loved? It was our code. If he sang it right, he was unharmed. If he changed the words, he was in danger." His voice came back, clear as a bell. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Original lyrics. He was scared but whole. "Good. Hurry up, Caldwell," Cassandra snapped. "Bring the deed. Come alone. No tricks, or Liam learns what happens when you cross me." I ended the call, my mind racing. The fake deed was in my pocket, a prop to buy time. The real plan was already in motion. I'd called in my old unit, 6 brothers who'd bled with me in places the world doesn't name. Snipers, all of them, with eyes like hawks and hands steady as stone. They were out there now, ghosts in the dark, their rifles trained on the factory. I'd texted Detective Alvarez the coordinates, using a coded shorthand from my ops days. His reply was short. Backup ready, need probable cause. The recorder was my ace. I just needed Cassandra to bury herself. I approached the main entrance, hands raised, the deed visible. Vince met me at the door, his bulk filling the frame. He patted me down, rough, missing the recorder in my jacket's lining. No wire, no weapons, he grunted, his breath sour with cheap whiskey. Boss says you're smart for a jarhead. Don't prove her wrong. I bit back a retort, letting him think he'd won. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, lit by flickering fluorescence. Old machinery rusted in corners, the floor stained with oil and time. Liam sat in the center, zip-tied to a metal chair, his eyes locked on me. When he saw me, his face lit up, but he stayed silent. Smart kid. My kid. Cassandra emerged from the gloom, flanked by two more goons. Lean, twitchy types with prison ink and cheap handguns. The setup was laughable. They'd bunched together, backs to the windows. No cover, no tactical spread. Bullies, not operators. They thought fear was enough. Cassandra's heels clicked on the concrete, her blazer pristine despite the filth around her. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her smile a venomous slash. The deed, please. I held it up but didn't hand it over. First, I want answers. How many families have you crushed? How deep does this go? She tilted her head, amused, like a cat toying with a mouse. You're stalling. Fine, I'll humor you. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. 43 properties in Pine Hollow and 4 other towns. 100 million in 3 years. The beauty of HOAs? They're legal extortion. We make the rules, levy the fines, foreclose when they can't pay. No one questions it. Not the banks, not the courts. We target the weak. Widows, single moms, old folks. They break fast. She gestured at Liam. Your profile was perfect. Widowed, isolated, military pension ripe for the taking. That corner lot? Developers are salivating. Once we rezone, it's a strip mall worth 10 million. I angled my body, ensuring the recorder caught every syllable. And the police? The mayor? She waved a hand, dismissive. Everyone's got a price. The chief's daughter got into Yale. The mayor's gambling debts vanished. 3 councilmen own condos in Miami, courtesy of our charitable fund. Even that cop you've been sniffing around, Alvarez? His sister's hospital bills are under review. He'll learn to play ball. Her confidence was her undoing. She thought she'd bought the world, thought no one could touch her. I pressed harder, my voice low, defeated. You've got it all figured out. No way out for me. Her smile widened, predatory. Exactly. This isn't just Pine Hollow, Ethan. We're a network. 200 HOAs across 15 states. We control property values, zoning boards, elections. In 10 years, we'll decide who lives where, who builds what. The American dream runs through us and we take our cut. She leaned in, her perfume cloying. But you could join us. A man like you, special forces, tactical mind, you'd be worth millions as our security chief. Sign the deed, work for us, and Liam gets the best of everything. Schools, vacations, a trust fund. Say yes, and this all goes away. The offer was a snake's whisper, tempting, calculated. They didn't just want my house. They wanted me, my skills, my silence. It made sense. Turn the threat into an asset. But they'd misread me. They thought a man who'd lost everything could be bought. That honor was a price tag. They didn't understand that some things, family, duty, the example you set for your son, were forged in blood, not dollars. I let the silence stretch, my face unreadable. That's a big offer, I said slowly. But what about the others? Margaret Lane, losing her home? George Tanner's sister, driven out? Cassandra's expression hardened, her mask slipping. Collateral damage, Colonel. You of all people should get that. How many died in your wars for freedom? This is no different. We're building an empire. Some eggs get broken. She nodded at Vince, who tightened his grip on Liam's shoulder. My son didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on me, trusting. I knelt, meeting his gaze, and whispered, "When I say storm, hit the floor. Got it?" He nodded, a flicker of a smile. "Brave as hell, my boy." I stood, facing Cassandra, the fake deed still in my hand. "One last thing," I said. "You ever think you picked the wrong guy to mess with?" Her brow furrowed, confusion flashing before fury took over. "You're out of moves, Ethan. Hand it over or—" I cut her off, my voice steel. "You forgot the first rule of war, Cassandra. Always secure your perimeter." Her eyes darted to the windows just as red laser dots bloomed on Vince's chest. Then the others. 6 snipers, my brothers, out there in the dark, each one a reaper with a scope. "Meet my team," I said, my smile cold. "You targeted a Marine. You targeted the Corps. Those sirens you're starting to hear? That's Alvarez, state police, and a few feds who don't take kindly to kidnapping and racketeering." Cassandra's face drained of color, her hand twitching toward her jacket. A pistol, poorly concealed. "Don't," I warned, my voice ablade. "My snipers had you zeroed since you opened your mouth. That confession? It's already on its way to the FBI. Awkward." I tapped my jacket where the recorder hummed. "Game over." "Storm!" I barked. Liam dropped flat, rolling under the chair. A flashbang shattered the window, light and sound exploding like a thunderclap. Vince lunged, but I was faster. A judo throw sending him crashing into a steel beam, out cold. The other goons froze, guns half raised as my team breached. Doors blasting open, boots pounding, rifles barking orders. "Down, down, hands where we can see them." Cassandra bolted for the loading dock, but Liam, my fearless kid, stuck out a foot, tripping her into a pile of crates. He looked up at me, grinning. "Oops." I was on her in a heartbeat, zip-tying her wrists, my knee pinning her to the concrete. "You messed with the wrong family," I growled. She snarled, spitting venom. "You think this stops us? You have no idea who you're fighting." I leaned close, my voice a low rumble. "I know exactly who you are, and I'm coming for all of them." Alvarez's team flooded in, cuffs snapping, radios crackling. Liam ran to me and I cut his ties, pulling him into a hug. "You okay, kid?" He nodded, eyes bright. "Knew you'd come, Dad. Always do." The recorder was gold. Every word of Cassandra's confession, from the $100 million scheme to the bribed officials, enough to bury her and her network. Alvarez took it, his face grim but satisfied. "This'll crack it wide open, Ethan. You did good." My team melted back into the night, ghosts again, but not before one clapped my shoulder. "Ura, brother. For Liam." I nodded, my throat tight. For Liam. Cassandra's empire was crumbling, but the war wasn't over. She was a cog, not the machine. The real fight, against the network she'd bragged about, was just beginning. But tonight I had my son, my mission was complete, and the enemy had learned a hard truth. You don't threaten a Marine's family and walk away. Not on my watch. The factory was a battlefield no more. Cassandra Wells, zip-tied and snarling, was dragged into a patrol car, her empire of greed crumbling under the weight of her own words. Vince, her granite-faced enforcer, lay unconscious, his bulk no match for a Marine's precision. The other goons, cowed by the red dots of my team's rifles, knelt with hands behind their heads as Alvarez's squad swarmed in, their radios crackling with the sound of justice finally waking up. Liam stood beside me, his small hand gripping mine, his eyes bright with a courage that burned hotter than any fire I'd faced in war. The night was ours, but the war wasn't over. I was Colonel Ethan Caldwell, and I'd just fired the first shot in a campaign to tear down the machine that dared threaten my son. Alvarez took the recorder, his face carved with respect. "This is dynamite, Ethan," he said, slipping it into an evidence bag. Cassandra's confession, $100 million, bribed cops, a network across 15 states. It's enough to bring the whole thing down. I nodded, my jaw tight. "Make sure it gets to the right people. No leaks, no lost files." He met my eyes, a soldier's promise in his gaze. "You have my word. My state police contact is clean. This goes straight to the feds." I trusted him, not because he wore a badge, but because he'd proven he couldn't be bought. In a world of snakes that was rarer than gold. Liam tugged my sleeve, his voice steady despite the chaos. Dad, are we safe now? I knelt, looking into eyes that held Sarah's wisdom and my resolve. We're safe tonight, kid, but we're not done fighting. These people hurt a lot of folks. We're going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. He nodded a soldier's nod, and I felt a surge of pride. At 10, he'd faced kidnappers and kept his head. My boy was steel. The aftermath unfolded like a well-executed op. My team, 6 snipers who'd answered my call without hesitation, slipped back into the shadows, their work done. They didn't need thanks. We were brothers, bound by blood in battles no one else would ever understand. One lingered, a grizzled master sergeant named Reyes, his eyes glinting with mischief. Your kid's got balls, Caldwell. Takes after his old man. He clapped Liam's shoulder, then vanished into the night. I smirked. High praise from a man who'd once taken out a warlord from a mile away. Back at Pine Hollow, the neighborhood stirred as dawn broke. Word of the takedown spread like wildfire, carried by cop radios and whispered rumors. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, their faces a mix of shock and relief. Margaret Lane, the widow who'd clung to her rose garden, stood at her gate, tears streaking her face. You did it, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. You stopped them. I shook my head. We did it, Margaret. You held the line. That's what counts. She hugged me, her frail frame shaking, and for the first time, I saw hope in her eyes. Alvarez's team worked fast. Cassandra's confession was a roadmap, exposing a network called the Property Syndicate. Vince, facing a laundry list of charges, kidnapping, extortion, racketeering, flipped faster than a traitor in a war zone. I'll talk, he stammered as they loaded him into a van. Cassandra's just a cog. The real players call themselves the board. They've got HOAs in 12 states, lawyers who bury complaints, accountants who launder the cash. It's a machine. His cowardice was pathetic, but his intel was gold. The feds, led by an FBI corruption unit, pounced, raiding offices from Seattle to Miami. The syndicate's playbook was diabolical. They'd infiltrate HOAs, rig elections, and weaponize rules to target vulnerable homeowners. Fines piled up until victims broke, selling their homes for pennies. The properties were flipped to developers or shell companies, netting millions. They'd bribed cops, mayors, even judges, creating a shield of corruption. Pine Hollow was their crown jewel, a testing ground for tactics they planned to roll out nationwide. But they'd underestimated one thing, a Marine who didn't know how to lose. Pine Hollow began to heal. The HOA's grip shattered, its rules scrapped overnight. Fees dropped to nothing, fines vanished, and the ridiculous mailbox color mandates became a bitter joke. Margaret's roses bloomed brighter, a middle finger to the old regime. George Tanner, the retired mechanic who'd warned me, started a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. No more suits telling us how to live, he growled at a community meeting, his voice rough with years of labor. The crowd roared approval, and I saw something I hadn't before: unity. Fear had kept them apart, but courage was knitting them back together. I met with Alvarez a week later, at the same diner 3 towns over. He slid a folder across the table, his eyes grim. The feds are moving fast. Cassandra's looking at 30 years minimum. Vince's testimony tied her to 3 state senators and a dozen city officials. They're all going down. He paused, stirring his coffee. But the board? They're ghosts. Shell companies, offshore accounts, encrypted communications. We'll get them, but it'll take time. I nodded, my mind already planning. What about Pine Hollow? Any blowback? He shook his head. Your neighbors are stepping up. Margaret's got recordings of HOA meetings going back years. Tanner's got photos of every violation notice. Even the mailman's been logging suspicious deliveries. This place is done being a victim. Liam became the neighborhood's quiet hero. At school, he started a watch club with his friends, teaching them to spot scams and report anything weird. No grown-up should ask you to keep secrets from your parents, he told them, his voice firm, echoing the lessons I drilled into him. The principal, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Carter, made it part of the curriculum. Your son's a leader, she told me at a parent-teacher conference. He's got a moral compass most adults lack. I smiled, pride burning in my chest. He gets it from his mom. The feds came knocking a month later. Special Agent Laura Bennett, a woman with a handshake like iron and eyes that missed nothing, sat me down at my kitchen table. Colonel Caldwell, your takedown exposed a national security threat. The syndicate wasn't just about money. They were targeting military families, exploiting relocations and PTSD to drive sales. We found manuals on how to push veterans' buttons. She slid an envelope across the table. The FBI wants you as a consultant. Your skills, your instincts, you're one of a kind. Help us finish this. I leaned back, the weight of her words settling in. The syndicate had profiled me, known my service record, my loss, my isolation. They'd seen a mark, not a man, but they'd also given me a new mission. I glanced at Liam, playing soccer in the backyard, his laughter a sound I'd die to protect. Part-time, I said finally. I'm a dad first. Bennett nodded, a rare smile breaking through. Fair enough, but Ethan, this fight's bigger than Pine Hollow. It's yours if you want it. The neighborhood changed in ways I hadn't expected. Block parties replaced HOA meetings, kids played in the streets without fear of noise complaints, and gardens sprouted with personality. Gnomes, flamingos, even a concrete dinosaur on Tanner's lawn. Margaret became the unofficial historian, documenting our fight in a scrapbook she shared at community events. This is for the kid, she said, her voice steady now, so they know what it means to stand up. I saw Sarah in her resilience, in the way she refused to break. It made the empty place at our dinner table ache a little less. But the syndicate's shadow lingered. Alvarez's task force, dubbed Iron Gate, after my call sign, uncovered similar schemes in dozens of towns. The board remained elusive, their names buried in layers of proxies and lies. I knew they'd come for me eventually. Men like that don't forgive a loss. I was ready. My cameras stayed active, my contacts on speed dial, my instincts sharper than ever. They'd started this war, but I'd finish it. For now, Pine Hollow was ours again. The fear was gone, replaced by something stronger. Trust. Neighbors who'd once avoided eye contact now shared beers over fences. Liam's watch club grew, his friends calling him Captain with grins that lit up the street. I coached his soccer team, finding purpose in teaching kids to fight as a unit, to never leave a man behind. We adopted a dog, a German Shepherd mix Liam named Sentinel, a nod to the note that had warned us. He patrolled our yard like a Marine, his bark a promise that no one would sneak up on us again. Cassandra's downfall was just the beginning. The feds followed the money, seizing accounts in the Caymans, Delaware, Dubai. 3 mayors resigned, 2 police chiefs retired, and a state senator vanished overnight, his mansion empty except for a half-packed suitcase. The media caught wind, headlines screaming, "Marine Dad dismantles criminal HOA empire." I turned down the talk shows, the book deals. This wasn't about fame, it was about home, about showing Liam that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could break us. As the dust settled, I stood in our backyard, watching Liam teach Sentinel to fetch. The stars were out, the neighborhood quiet, the air clean of fear. We'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. The syndicate was wounded, not dead, and I knew their kind. Cowards who hid behind money and lies. They'd come again, in a new form, a new place. Let them. I was Colonel Ethan Caldwell, and I'd be waiting. My son at my side, my brothers at my back, and a fire in my gut that no one could extinguish. Pine Hollow was no longer just a neighborhood, it was a stronghold, forged from the wreckage of fear and reclaimed by courage. 6 months after Cassandra Wells' empire fell, our streets pulsed with life. Kids raced bikes past gardens exploding with color, their laughter erasing the ghosts of fines and threats. Block parties lit up the nights, grills smoking, music thumping, neighbors dancing like they'd forgotten what it meant to live under a tyrant's thumb. The HOA was a husk, reduced to a handful of volunteers who cared about fixing streetlights, not wielding power. Margaret Lane's roses climbed her fence, a defiant blaze of red and white, each petal a middle finger to the old regime. George Tanner's neon green dinosaur sculpture stood tall, a prank by the kids that became a symbol of our rebellion. This was our home, one with blood, grit, and a refusal to break. I was Colonel Ethan Caldwell, and I'd fought for this, not just for Liam, my son, but for every soul crushed by the machine we'd torn apart. The collapse of the property syndicate was a shockwave. Cassandra's confession, paired with Vince's spineless betrayal, gave the feds everything they needed. 17 kingpins, lawyers, accountants, real estate moguls, faced indictments, their mansions seized, their names dragged through the dirt. The mysterious board, the syndicate's puppet masters, weren't untouchable anymore. The FBI froze their offshore accounts, raided their shell companies, and followed a money trail that led to a state senator who took a plea deal, his confession implicating a congressman who retired overnight. The media dubbed it the HOA scandal, but to us it was justice. Every arrest, every headline was a victory for the widows, single parents, and retirees who'd lost their homes, their savings, their hope. Liam became a local legend. His watch club, now called the Sentinels, after the cryptic note that warned us, grew to include kids from 3 schools. He taught his friends to spot scams, trust their gut, and never keep secrets from their parents. The school board asked him to record training videos, and there was my 10-year-old staring into the camera with eyes wiser than his years. "If an adult asks you to lie, they're not your friend," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "Tell someone you trust, always." Those videos went viral, adopted by school districts across the state. Sarah, his mother, would have beamed with pride. Hell, I was bursting with it. My son didn't just survive. He changed the rules of the game. I took a part-time consulting gig with the FBI, balancing it with coaching Liam's soccer team and hosting our weekly pizza nights. The public corruption unit needed me. My special forces training, my knack for sniffing out threats, my first-hand knowledge of the syndicate's playbook. I helped write a guide for spotting HOA fraud, trained agents to unravel corrupt networks, and spoke to communities about standing up to predators. But my first mission was always Liam. Every case I took, every scheme we crushed, was for him, to ensure no other kid faced the terror he'd endured. I'd promised Sarah I'd keep him safe, and I'd die before breaking that vow. Pine Hollow became a beacon. Reporters flocked to our streets, cameras capturing our story. We won the National Neighborhood Association's Best Community Turnaround Award, a plaque we hung in the community center, now renamed Lane Hall in Margaret's honor. At the ceremony, they asked me to speak. I stepped to the podium, Liam at my side, his city-issued Young Courage medal gleaming on his chest. I kept it short, my voice like iron. A year ago, we learned monsters don't always lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes they wear suits and carry clipboards. But we also learned heroes don't need capes. They're widows who tend roses, mechanics who document truth, kids who trust their instincts, neighbors who refuse to quit. This award belongs to Pine Hollow. We saved our home. More importantly, we found our family. The community grew stronger in ways I hadn't imagined. Margaret started a gardening club, teaching kids to plant seeds and nurture the earth. Tanner hosted car repair nights, showing teens how to change oil and fix brakes. The mailman, a quiet guy named Sam, became our unofficial lookout, logging every strange car, every odd delivery. Even Sentinel, our German Shepherd mix, had a role, patrolling the streets with Liam, accepting treats from neighbors who'd become kin. Empty houses filled with new families, drawn by our story of defiance. We told them what happened, not to scare them, but to show what's possible when people stand together. The syndicate's fallout rippled beyond Pine Hollow. Alvarez's Iron Gate Task Force exposed HOA scams in 40 cities, restoring homes to over 500 families. The state legislature drafted Liam's Law, a reform mandating transparency in HOA operations and shielding whistleblowers. Hearing my son's name tied to a law felt surreal, but if it spared another family our nightmare, every second of fear was worth it. Veterans groups mobilized, building networks to protect military families from similar abuses. My old unit launched a nonprofit, Veterans Against HOA Abuse, offering legal aid and support to those facing predators like the syndicate. What started as a fight for our home had sparked a movement. But victory wasn't absolute. The board, those shadow dwellers pulling the syndicate's strings, remained at large, their names buried in a maze of proxies and lies. The feds were closing in, but these were men who thrived in darkness, who struck from a distance. I knew they were watching, biding their time. Let them come. My house was a fortress, cameras, alarms, a neighborhood that had my back. My unit was a call away, Alvarez a text. And Liam, my unbreakable Liam, was sharper than ever, his eyes keen, his heart forged in fire. We'd face the abyss and come out stronger. The board could try their luck. We'd be ready. One evening, as we hosted a community pizza night, a tradition born from our newfound unity, a knock came at the door. A tall woman in a crisp suit stood on the porch, holding an official envelope. "Colonel Caldwell," she said, her voice steady. "Special Agent Riley, FBI Public Corruption Unit." The director wanted this delivered personally. Inside was a letter that hit like a mortar round. "Dear Colonel Caldwell," it read, "your actions in dismantling the property syndicate have saved countless communities and exposed a critical threat to our national security. Your tactical expertise, investigative instincts, and ability to rally a community under pressure are unmatched. We invite you to discuss a leadership role with our task force on organized crime in community institutions. Your unique blend of military experience and insight into these networks makes you invaluable." Liam, peeking over my shoulder, grinned. "Does this mean you're going to be a secret agent, Dad? Can I be your sidekick?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Let's see what they're offering, kid. You've got school, soccer, and your safety videos. You're already busy saving the world." But as I reread the letter, I felt the old pull, the same call I'd answered when I enlisted, when I swore to protect what mattered, to serve, to fight, to make a difference. Maybe it was time for a new mission. Riley smiled, reading my silence. "Take your time, Colonel, but for what it's worth, your country needs men like you. Men who know the biggest threats often hide in plain sight, wearing suits and running HOAs." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Liam, we've got a great internship program when you're older." Just saying. That night after Liam was asleep, I stood in the backyard staring at the stars. 6 months ago, Pine Hollow was enemy territory, a place where fear ruled every doorstep. Now it was home, in the truest sense. Not just a house, but a community that had faced darkness and chosen light. I'd turned down the FBI's leadership role, but expanded my consulting work, traveling to train communities while staying the dad Liam needed. Every case was a promise kept, to Sarah, to Liam, to myself. Life found a new rhythm. Liam joined the swim team, his stroke strong like his mother's. I coached soccer, finding joy in teaching kids to fight as a team, to never leave a man behind. Sentinel became the neighborhood mascot, his evening patrols a ritual everyone loved. The empty chair at our table still ached, but we honored Sarah by living fully, helping others, standing for what's right. "Mom would have fought too, right, Dad?" Liam asked one night, gazing at her photo. "Without hesitation, kid," I said. "She was the bravest person I knew, until I met you." Sometimes in the quiet of night, I thought of Cassandra in her cell, stripped of her suits and her power. Did she ever wonder how it unraveled? Not by feds or laws, but by a kid who loved his father enough to break the rules, by neighbors who found strength in each other, by a man who refused to be prey? Mostly, I didn't think of her. I was too busy living, teaching Liam to ride his new bike, planning block parties with Margaret, consulting on cases that gave families their homes back. The best revenge wasn't vengeance. It was building something better from the ruins of what tried to destroy us. As the sun set over Pine Hollow, children's laughter echoed through streets once choked by fear. Garden lights twinkled without regulation. Neighbors chatted over fences without dreading violations. Somewhere, a committee planned the second annual Freedom from HOA Tyranny block party, complete with a dunk tank where kids would try to soak me while I wore a fake HOA president sash. Life was good. We were home. And to those still lurking with their suits and clipboards, a warning. Don't underestimate a Marine, a kid with courage, a community that won't break. When good people stand together, no scheme is too big to crumble, no corruption too deep to expose. Stand tall, fight hard, protect what's yours. This is Ethan Caldwell, signing off from Pine Hollow, where the HOA serves the people, the neighborhood watch has teeth, and the monsters learn the hard way what happens when you mess with a Marine's family. See you at the block party.